I am the Grand Princess, whose influence spans the court and the realm. My consort kneels before me, flanked by a woman bearing his child. He seeks to take a concubine. Yet this maiden aspires to be his lawful wife. She stands with disdain, all are born equal, why should I kneel? The princess and the prince consort have never shared affection. Why can't you grant us your blessing? I smiled faintly, if you refuse to kneel, then die. Princess, Yao Shi has arrived again. I set down the memorials in my hands, rubbing my temples with a troubled frown as I listened to the low report from Nanny Kong beside me. The princess and the prince consort have no real affection for each other. Why can't you grant us your blessing? The entire realm is yours, but I have only him. All people are born equal. Why should I kneel before her? Here she goes again. This girl has been repeating these very words outside my palace gates for 3 days now. When Chen Qi first brought her to me, I hadn't reacted strongly, merely instructing my attendants to arrange lodgings for her. I also ordered Chen Qi to reside in the side hall, ensuring proper care for Yao Xi's pregnancy. After listening to the woman's incessant clamor for a while, I snapped impatiently, "Where is the prince consort? Has he died? Tell him to take his woman back." Seeing this, Nanny Kong soothed, "Your Highness, the prince consort has returned to the Chen residence to fetch the deed for you. He likely isn't in the palace at this hour." Hearing the word deed, my furrowed brows relaxed slightly, and the corners of my lips turned up. Then it matters little to listen a while longer. After all, nothing matters more than silver. Kong shook her head. "Your Highness, today is the first day of the month. All the noble ladies must enter the palace to pay their respects. By now, they've surely passed through the palace gates. If they witness this scene, who knows what rumors they'll spread about you. Your reputation outside the palace." Reputation? Kong, what reputation do I have left to care about? The late emperor drained the treasury dry over the years. This spring, Longxi suffered a severe drought, and the southern embankments breached. Then there's the military pay for Shuabe. Nanny Kong, without money, Great Xian might not even last another year. After I finished speaking, Mother Kang's eyes reddened slightly. She could only sigh helplessly and grind ink for me. The commotion outside gradually subsided. Just as I was puzzling over it, a palace attendant hurried in to report, "Your Highness. That Miss Yao Shi, with her swollen belly, has gone to the outer hall where the consorts are waiting. Your servant cannot enter that area. The current situation is unknown." My brow twitched. This woman certainly knew how to stir up trouble. I led my attendants to the outer hall where the noble ladies were gathered. The moment I entered, all fell silent and stood to one side. Except for Grand Consort Gua, seated in the main position. By rights, Grand Consort Gua shouldn't have been present at such an occasion. Frankly, she was merely one of my father the emperor's concubines. After struggling in the harem for most of her life, she finally bore a son and was poised to become Empress Dowager. Alas, the late emperor never granted her that title before his death. Truthfully, the late emperor's wishes mattered little, it was my refusal that held sway. Without me, the entire Great Xian Empire would fall into the hands of those court ministers. Though the late emperor was weak-willed, he wasn't foolish. Consort Gua was inherently a troublemaker. If she became Empress Dowager, she would inevitably meddle in state affairs. Rather than having to negotiate with her later, it was better to offend her completely now. Therefore, Consort Gua took every opportunity to cause me trouble. "And you've been married to the prince consort for 3 years now. He's finally blessed with an heir, how can you be so intolerant?" Hearing the Dowager Empress speak thus, my gaze instinctively swept toward Yao Xi, who sat quietly beside her. Yao Xi was eerily quiet at that moment. Though heavily pregnant, her appearance was truly pitiable, looking every bit the wronged concubine tormented by her mistress. When had I ever bullied her? Seriously, what mistress would want her husband spending every night in the concubine's quarters? Not a single slap or scolding, she even treated her to fine food and drink. But this girl, with her muddled mind, just had to stir up trouble. Just as I was about to speak, Grand Consort Gua continued, "I hear the prince consort has been showering your palace with gifts these days, silver, shops, worth no less than 10,000 taels. Though you are a princess, he is still a man. You must understand. At these words, the noblewomen in the hall exchanged glances, each seeing a trace of contempt in the other's eyes. Sensing the atmosphere was turning sour, my heart sank. I forced myself to adopt Yao Xi's expression, squeezing tears from my eyes as I lamented, "Now that Grand Consort Wu has spoken these words before you, I can no longer concern myself with appearances. As a princess, I have borne my husband numerous concubines over 3 years of marriage, a fact Grand Consort Wu surely knows well. Yet the prince consort refuses to touch any respectable woman, insisting instead on taking obscure women from outside the palace, even impregnating one. Is this not trampling the imperial family's honor into the dirt? I pity the prince consort for his lack of heirs. I have never treated Miss Yaoxi unfairly, I even insisted he visit her chambers daily. If that still isn't enough, must he divorce my lady to satisfy you all?" As I finished speaking, I pressed a handkerchief to my eyes while stealing glances at the others' expressions. Sure enough, the contemptuous looks on the other noble ladies' faces gradually faded. Some even cast sympathetic glances my way. "Your Highness, you never truly loved the prince consort. You're nothing but a greedy, petty woman. Ah, Qi is truly pitiful to have married someone like you." Hearing Yao Xi speak thus, everyone cowered, unable to lift their gaze. Even the Empress Dowager Gu beside me wore an expression of utter disbelief. This woman was nothing short of a madwoman. I looked up at this woman spouting nonsense and found it laughable. True feelings? If Chen Qi had ever truly cared for you, he wouldn't have agreed to marry me solely for the sake of imperial power. Yao Xi met my gaze, her expression resolute. As if she were prepared to defend their love to the death. I feared she might choke on her own breath and faint, which would inevitably provoke the Chen family. Better for me to faint first than for her to collapse. With that thought, I turned and signaled to Nanny Kong beside me. I stumbled unsteadily and collapsed to the ground. Kong Nanny hurriedly caught me, lamenting, "Your Highness has been utterly exhausted these past days. You often review memorials late into the night, then attend to the affairs of the princess's residence during the day. You are truly worn out." With that, she gently guided me out of the outer hall, leaving the chamber full of court ladies exchanging bewildered glances. I'd never cared much for dealing with them anyway. Yao Xi's outburst today had actually freed me from the ordeal. As Kong Mam supported me along the palace path, I saw no one around and straightened my posture slightly. "Your Highness, shall we return to the palace?" Gazing at the endless palace path stretching ahead, an indescribable bitterness welled up in my heart. "Nanny, return to the palace first. I wish to walk alone." I wandered aimlessly through the vast imperial palace, somehow finding myself drawn to a secluded study garden. This place was meant for imperial princes to study, but alas, the late emperor's foolishness led others to follow suit. Over time, it had fallen into disrepair. Surveying the familiar surroundings within the courtyard, I felt as though I'd returned to my youth, when I studied alongside my imperial brother. Alas, heaven envies talent. My brother passed away too soon, and Shinzongi, who had been his companion in studies, rarely appeared in the palace anymore. All of Great Shan knew that I, Princess Anyu, had not only broken my childhood betrothal to the general of the flying cavalry for the wealth of the imperial merchant Shin family, but also, upon seizing power, banished General Shinzongi to the northern frontier with a single edict. This exile lasted 3 years. Everyone had departed, leaving me alone to face this kingdom, now as muddy and unstable as the riverbed. "Shinzongi, I feel I can barely hold on any longer." A faint sting pricked my nose. Having overacted in the scene moments ago, tears now welled relentlessly in my eyes. Just as I reached to wipe them away, my wrist was seized from behind. The fingertips felt slightly cool, yet the palm held a warm heat. Its touch upon my skin felt like a scorching burn. "After all these years apart, Your Highness, how have you become so weak?" A familiar voice sounded at my ear. I turned and lifted my gaze, but my wrist was held firmly, causing a sharp ache. Shinzongi! What brings you here?" 3 years had passed since our last meeting. He seemed even more rugged and stern than before, his unsmiling expression commanding respect. Quite intimidating. Half a month ago, after the great victory at Pingling Mountain, this servant submitted his resignation to report back to the capital. "Has Your Highness forgotten?" His words jogged my memory, something like that did happen. But Shuabe lay thousands of miles away. Even returning to the capital would take a month. I'd expected him to come back, but not this soon. Your Highness has been crying. Was it for him? Shinzoni spoke while reaching out to brush the faint redness from my eyes, his gaze shifting darkly. I had rarely seen such an expression on Shinzoni's face, except for that one time 3 years ago. Back then, Father Emperor lay gravely ill, the court was in turmoil, and the Shuabe rebels pressed against our borders. To raise military funds, I had no choice but to marry into the Chen family. Yet on our wedding night, the prince consort was nowhere to be seen. Just as I was about to lift my veil myself, someone beat me to it. A brutal force then slammed me onto the wedding bed. I tried to push him away, only to meet Shinzoni's dark, intense gaze fixed on me. His voice was hoarse. What he can give you, I can give you too. Why must it be him? I remained silent, turning my head away as if afraid to meet his burning eyes. Look at me! Speak! I looked at him, feeling my heart leap out of my chest, yet I still couldn't bring myself to speak. Ling on you have no conscience. Failing to get the answer he wanted, met only with my stubborn gaze, Shinzoni slowly released his grip on my hands. Using the momentum, I pushed him away and forced myself to sound calm. General Shin, the army will set out tomorrow. On the battlefield, swords and spears have no eyes. Take care of yourself. The entire Great Shin Empire knows that I, Princess Anyu, not only broke my childhood betrothal to the general of the flying cavalry for the wealth of the imperial merchant Shin family, but also, after seizing power, banished General Shinzoni to Shuabe with a single imperial edict. I watched his expression shift from anger to disappointment. I stood up and watched him leave. Just as the bridal chamber door closed, Shinzoni returned, seizing my neck. His scorching breath washed over my face. A sharp sting at my lips sent me flailing wildly against his back, desperate to break free, yet I couldn't escape his grip. Only when I felt suffocated, my legs weakening as I leaned against the door, did Shinzoni slowly release his grip. As I trembled all over, gasping for breath, Shinzoni leaned close to my ear and growled viciously, "If you dare let him touch you, I'll immediately lead my troops back to the capital. I'll settle his account first, then come for yours." Ling on you. How could you be so vicious? Before he even stepped through the palace gates, Qinchi shouted at me, his neck strained. Seeing him so hoarse and breathless, I chuckled inwardly. Well. After all these years, this man finally shows some backbone. Seeing me say nothing, not even sparing him a glance as I returned to the study, Qinchi lunged forward and shoved aside Aishu, the maid standing beside me. Yaoshi suffered a sudden fetal distress today. Consort Gui says it was because of your anger. Ling on you. If you dislike Yaoshi, that's one thing, but how dare you harm her child? His hand shot out to strike my face, but my reflexes were quicker. I struck back. Have you forgotten all the etiquette you learned? Is it because I've long resided in the inner quarters that you've forgotten my status? Qinchi clutched his face, seething but unable to speak. Because I was a princess, the powerful grand princess who held sway over the court. Seeing his righteous indignation, and recalling how that woman had driven me to distraction these past days, I sneered coldly. Qinchi, don't you remember how our marriage came about? I, Ling on you, am ruthless and greedy for wealth, so I married into your Chen family? But is that truly the case? At these words, Qinchi's eyes flickered for an instant. His voice trembled. Why are you looking at me like that? Our Chen family has done nothing to wrong you. We've given you ample silver and money over the years. I only wanted to give Yaoshi a proper status. Don't speak nonsense. I lifted my head, my gaze icy as I stared at this man, more beautiful than any woman yet utterly hypocritical. Even if your Chen family gave me every last coin they own, it couldn't bring back my imperial brother's life. Years ago, my brother was sent by imperial decree to open the Shuabe horse route. By some coincidence, he encountered rebel forces. That Shuabe Khan broke his oath at the last moment, causing my brother's death in Shuabe. I advanced step by step toward Qinchi, only to see him stiffen completely, his voice trembling with unease. What does this have to do with the Chen family? Nothing? Do you truly believe I'm unaware of how much your family has plundered from the Shuabe trade routes these past years? and the salt and iron trade, both forbidden by imperial decree. How much more profit has your family reaped under the guise of this eldest princess? What my imperial brother, the crown prince of this realm, failed to accomplish, your Chen family took over effortlessly, even becoming the de facto rulers of the Shuabe horse trail. Must I spell out how much the great Khan of Shuabe has rewarded you? With that, I drew a sealed letter from my sleeve and flung it directly at Chen Qi's face. Chen Qi stared at the letter in disbelief. It clearly depicted members of the Chen family secretly meeting with the great Khan of Shuabe at the border. I married you for money. You married me for imperial protection. But don't think that by pinning all the blame on me, your Chen family can walk away unscathed. There are things I can turn a blind eye to, but others, even if it means mutual destruction, are impossible. You've been paid what you're owed. Shut your mouth, keep your woman in line, and stay as far away from me as possible. Otherwise, it will be your Chen family that perishes. A slow smile spread across my lips. I didn't even bother to spare Chen Qi a glance as I gazed at the newly dyed kojaku. Perhaps my words had struck Chen Qi's sore spot. Furious, he tore the secret letter in his hand to shreds. In a single stride, he lunged forward and seized my wrist. He demanded urgently, Ling On you, how high and mighty do you think you are? All these years, you refused to share a bed with me, was it all for that Shinzongi? I hear he returned to the capital today and went straight to the palace without even stopping at the general's residence. What devotion! I'd never seen Chen Qi so enraged. It seemed his previous meekness had been an act. Perhaps seeing me break ties with him today had unsettled him, driving him to such recklessness. Ah Zhu, who had stood by my side all along, rushed forward in alarm. What are you doing, Prince Consort? How dare you be so disrespectful to Her Highness the Princess? She is a precious jewel. If she wishes you to attend to her in her chambers, then serve her. But if she refuses, how dare you force yourself upon her? 3 pointed questions in quick succession left Chen Qi feeling utterly ashamed. The grip on my wrist tightened uncontrollably. Just as I was about to order him dragged out, a flash of green caught my eye outside the door. Perfect timing. You claimed all women outside are merely playing games, yet only I hold your true affection. Is that really so? Seizing the moment of Chen Qi's shock, I hooked my hand around his jade sash and murmured. Ling On you, what are you implying? Before he could finish, Yao Ji burst in, her swollen belly protruding. Qi, is she telling the truth? Seeing her reaction, I smirked with satisfaction. Miss Yao, you're supposed to be resting. Why are you out? Chen Qi hastily released his grip on me and approached Yao Ji to soothe her. It's a misunderstanding. It's not what you saw. The princess and I were discussing urgent matters. Watching Chen Qi's frantic display, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. What a showman. I waved my hand, signaling them to leave quickly. Chen Qi tried to argue further, but Yao Ji stopped her. For some inexplicable reason, I caught a fleeting, unusual expression on Yao Ji's face. It wasn't disappointment, nor relief. It carried a hint of cold, murderous intent. What secrets does this woman truly hide? Your Highness. Should we tend to your wrist? Ah Zhu, noticing my pallid complexion, asked cautiously. I glanced at my slightly swollen wrist, casually covering it with my sleeve. It's unnecessary. Then, as if remembering something, my tone turned warning, not a word of today's events to him. Do you understand? Aju's face twisted with reluctance, but she nodded in the end. Over the years, I've gradually consolidated the Chen family's influence in the capital. What I discovered was startling, more than half the officials in the entire Dashuan court had ties to the Chen family. At its core, Shuabe was the Chen family's true objective. Therefore, I cannot allow Shinzongi to linger in the capital too long. My only bargaining chip now is the military power in my hands. It must remain with someone trustworthy. The true purpose behind my order for him to leave the capital to suppress the rebellion years ago was not only to intimidate the great Khan of Shuabe but also to secretly uncover every detail about the Chen family. To ensure every penny of the people's hard-earned wealth plundered by the Chen family over the years is returned. The next morning at court, I sat upon the dragon throne as usual, cradling the young emperor in my arms. I lowered my gaze to the chubby little child nestled against me, then swept my eyes over the assembled ministers and officials below. The hall fell silent for a few breaths before He Yong, the Minister of Revenue, stepped forward and spoke slowly. "Your Majesty, I must report that the Prince Consort has acted with utter disregard for the law. He has abused his royal status to interfere in the salt and iron trade, and has allowed his relatives to illegally seize peasant lands. His embezzlement of silver amounts to tens of thousands. I beseech your Majesty to render judgment." I narrowed my eyes slightly and asked in a deep voice, "Where is the Prince Consort?" Seeing no one respond, Aju whispered in my ear, "Your Highness, last night on his way home, a group of assassins suddenly appeared and wounded the Prince Consort's arm. This morning, he sent a servant to request leave. He likely cannot attend court today." Injured his arm? A sudden thought flashed through my mind. Could it be such a coincidence? I lifted my gaze to Shinzongi below the dais. He was staring intently at me. Noticing my return of his gaze, he raised an eyebrow with evident amusement. As if to say, "You're quite right." I nearly slapped my forehead. After 3 years apart, this man remained as childish as ever. Clearing my throat, I declared, "Though the Prince Consort is ill, court regulations must not be violated. Confine him to his quarters for 5 days. Order the Ministry of Justice to investigate this matter thoroughly. If the allegations prove true, further action will be determined." The ministers raised no further objections to this, but turned their discussion to another matter. Recent unrest along the northern border suggests the Shuabe may be stirring trouble. Your servant believes we must strike first. Otherwise, those wolves of Shuabe will inevitably launch a surprise attack. Your servant second the motion. Your servant second the motion. Look at these words from the civil officials. Haven't I considered all this? But Your Excellencies speak wisely, but what of the logistics? The treasury is depleted. How shall we replenish it? No one spoke up after I finished. I sneered, glancing at Shinzongi. "See, General Shen? This is the role of the Chen family. I do turn a blind eye to the Chen family's actions. Otherwise, how would the silver and gold from corrupt officials ever reach the treasury?" With no ministers offering counsel, I looked at Shinzongi. He always understood my intentions. This time, he stepped forward. "This servant volunteers to lead the expedition. But may I ask the esteemed ministers to ensure sufficient provisions are secured for Shin's campaign?" After court adjourned, I headed toward my study as usual. But halfway there, Shinzongi intercepted me. Without a word, he pulled me aside. His towering frame loomed over me, the pine-scented collar of his robe brushing my nose as he drew me into his embrace. He stared at me expressionless, then suddenly broke into a relieved smile. This man is utterly baffling. If there's unrest in Shuabe within a month, I'll move against the Chen family early. In the meantime, I need you to strip the feudal lords of their military authority and concentrate all forces at the borders and outside the capital. Why? Why? Because scouts from Shuabe reported that Princess Kangin of Shuabe has been missing for a year. I didn't share this news with Shinzongi. His own spies would uncover it sooner or later. After handling these matters, I must return home to deal with the Chen family. Since this is a strategy of flattery leading to destruction, the Chen family hasn't reached their zenith yet and remains cautious. It's time to let them taste a bit of power. On you, you've yet to see the snow of the northern wastes. Shinzongi leaned against the wall, watching me. My heart skipped a beat. Calmly gazing ahead, I murmured, "The capital sees no snow year after year." After handling state affairs, I returned to the manor. Before even stepping through the gate, I heard a commotion within. Upon entering, the scene was truly lively. Yaoshi stood nearby, her swollen belly visible, weeping bitterly like a pear blossom drenched in rain. Qin-Chi stood beside her, softly soothing her. My mother-in-law, however, glared at Yaoshi with indignation, while my father-in-law's face was ashen. Their expressions shifted the moment they saw me enter. Though my mother-in-law disliked me, she still gave me the respect due my position. "Greetings, Princess." I nodded to them, intending to return to my room without further inquiry. Unexpectedly, Qin-Chi called out to me. I turned, my expression amused as I watched him. He seemed to have summoned great resolve before approaching. My mother-in-law fixed her gaze intently on Yaoshi beside him. "Princess, I wish to elevate Yaoshi to co-wife." Nonsense. My father-in-law, Chen, slammed his fist on the table and leapt to his feet. He likely never imagined his own son could utter such an outrageous statement. Shaking with fury, my mother-in-law hurried forward to soothe him. Chen ignored his father and continued unabashedly, Gigi's child is about to be born. I refuse to let this child bear the stigma of being a concubine's offspring. I was about to retort sarcastically. He beat me to it. If your highness consents, I shall present 10,000 taels of gold. I raised an eyebrow at him. Wasn't this like someone offering a pillow when you're tired? Still, I feigned distress. Your affection for Miss Yao deeply moves this palace. Yet taking a wife equal to the princess not only shows contempt for the imperial family but also challenges the sovereign's authority. I emphasized the last words heavily, yet this fool still wore an unwavering expression. It was truly amusing. I shot Chen a meaningful glare, making him flinch in fright. The Chen family truly has ambition but lacks the courage to match it. Nanny Kong helped me into a chair, rubbing my shoulders with a look of pity. Your highness has suffered these past days. There's no need to fret over the Chen family, they'll be dealt with in due time. I smiled faintly, still pondering what position would be fitting for the Chen family. My ears hadn't found peace for long before commotion erupted again in the outer courtyard. Princess, it's Miss Yao. Kong Mam glanced outside, her eyes brimming with deep disgust. Before I could rise, Xiao Tao from the outer courtyard rushed in, her expression peculiar as she reported, Your Highness, Miss Yao requests an audience with you. How dare she? An unnamed, unmarried mistress expects the princess to go out to her? Nanny Kong snapped angrily. I was just considering granting the Chen family a favor, and now she's practically begging for it? Go fetch my father-in-law and mother-in-law. Let them come see for themselves what kind of woman their son has taken a fancy to. Xiao Tao bowed and dashed out. Stepping outside, I saw Yaoxi gazing at the servants with a mix of pity and haughty superiority. Her expression turned especially contemptuous when she noticed me. She was draped head to toe in brocade and silk. Recently, Chen had given her a substantial sum of silver, allowing her to open a ready-made clothing shop in the capital. She claimed her designs were the most flattering for women, yet her garments either exposed legs or arms, some even daring enough to reveal the navel. Even courtesans in brothels sneered at her creations. Naturally, the noble ladies of the capital found them distasteful, yet she believed I had ordered her business shut down. These past days, she's been pestering me for an explanation. I'd normally have no time for such a foolish woman. But she is Yao Ji. Let her make a scene, the bigger the fuss, the more money the Chen family will send to this palace. Sure enough, the moment I appeared, she began her outburst. Your Highness truly understands power, bullying others with your influence. Seeing my lack of response, she pressed on, now that my shop is ruined, are you satisfied? Shouldn't you agree to my husband's request and make me his co-wife? As she uttered these words, my in-laws stepped into my courtyard. Hearing Yaoxi's shocking declaration, they both stumbled and fell at my doorway. The commotion made Yaoxi flinch and turn her head away. After the servants helped the elderly couple up, Chen strode over, glaring at Yaoxi with venom. Rest assured, princess. The Chen family will never elevate this woman to be Qie's co-wife. Under his glare, Yaoxi cowered, biting her lip angrily but dared not speak. Seeing Yaoxi's sullen expression, Chen frowned in disgust. My mother-in-law's look of contemptuous impatience told me it was time to bestow grace. Chen had Yaoxi led away, and my mother-in-law followed. Your Highness, I understand that among the 3 great disgraces of filial piety, failing to produce an heir is the worst. That is why I have spared the seed within Yao's womb. I paused deliberately, studying his expression, a tapestry of shifting emotions. But the Chen family has repeatedly trampled the imperial family's dignity into the dust. Such treasonous acts are unforgivable. And the Chen family is not the only imperial merchant house. Sure enough, after I spoke these words, his expression grew even more vivid. Seeing the moment had come, I deliberately toyed with my fingers as I watched him weigh his options. What does one son mean beneath imperial power? His face darkened as he seemed to make a decision. He lifted his head and said, by the princess's command alone, but the princess must ensure the Chen family has an heir. Seeing his consent, I smiled and nodded. How could I refuse such a simple condition? Wasn't it perfect to have my infant brother adopted over? The Jiangnan floods still need a governor to send silver for relief. Father, see which Chen family member is suitable. Jiangnan summers always brought heavy rains. With such rainfall, floods were inevitable. The position of Jiangnan governor was a plum post everyone coveted. Not only could one reap enormous profits from it, but the position also offered the chance to network with all manner of officials, a valuable connection. The Chen family had always prized such connections. With such generous terms on my part, how could the Chen family possibly resist? And resist they wouldn't. Because they wouldn't suspect that I had already dispatched the inspector and the imperial guards, under the orders of Minister Jingsun. They would be acting on the command of the princess. Corrupt officials, all to be executed without mercy. The more the Chen family demanded, the more delighted I became. Sure enough, upon hearing these terms, Qinsheng's previously sullen face broke into a smile, deepening the wrinkles at his eyes. Overjoyed, he thanked me profusely. I let the corners of my mouth turn up. The Chen family truly deserved the label of fools. With the Jiangnan floods looming, the Chen family selected their candidate the very next day. They announced Chen Shu, Qinsheng's own nephew. Qinsheng even insisted I approve him personally. I watched the restless man bowing below. I chuckled softly. The Chen family truly has a taste for concubine-born sons. As Chen Shu prepared to take office, Yao Shi came to my courtyard again. This time, she didn't make a scene like before. Instead, she stood quietly in a corner of the small courtyard. Seeing her covered in glittering jewels, my smile turned 3 parts colder. She watched me come out, subtly trying to get closer. Auntie, it's best you don't come any closer. If anything were to happen, our princess couldn't bear the responsibility. Kong Nanny cautioned from behind. At this, Yao Shi halted. The forced smile vanished from her lips, replaced by a flash of venom in her eyes. What's the rush? I just wanted to admire the flowers in your garden. I'll leave once I've had a look. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Kong Nanny looking utterly bewildered. I cast a meaningful glance at the few buds still closed by the doorway. So impatient already? That night, lying in bed, I pondered how to root out these corrupt officials. A commotion came from outside the window. I lazily rolled over, intending to ignore whoever it was. But Shinzoni, thick-skinned as ever, pushed open the door and strode in. I kept my eyes tightly shut, refusing to acknowledge this ruffian. Suddenly, his strong arms tightened around my waist, pulling me into his embrace. His hot breath brushed against my neck as he gently nuzzled behind my ear, as if we were sharing an intimate moment. What? You knew it was me, Your Highness, and still left the door open? His voice carried a hint of amusement as he flicked a stray lock of hair from my ear with a smile. Get lost. I rolled over, glaring at him. But in the moonlight, I clearly saw the pallor on his cheeks. Beneath the rosin he usually wore, there was a faint scent of blood. You're hurt? I realized suddenly. Shinzoni narrowed his phoenix eyes, his chin resting on my head. It's fine, already bandaged. You made me carry you. I risked my life for you today, so naturally I deserve a reward. Unrest in Shuabe? MHM. I nestled quietly in his embrace. Soon, Shinzoni's rhythmic breathing reached my ears. I couldn't help turning to look at him. Beneath his black robes, his ponytail was tied back. The dark circles beneath his eyes were likely from uncovering matters concerning Shuabe. My hand drifted unconsciously to trace his brow and eyes. When had that spoiled young master of the capital transformed into an invincible general? And you, stop fussing. Let me sleep. Shinzoni pressed my hand down with a sigh, pulling me deeper into his embrace. The soothing scent of sandalwood from his body calmed me, and soon I too drifted into a deep sleep. The next morning, that dog of a man hadn't left. He sat leisurely sipping tea beside me. Spotting my awakening, a smile played at his lips. I've left the items and letter here. You can look at them yourself. I'm heading out to mobilize troops. Be wary of the flower-viewing banquet Empress Dowager Gui is hosting in 3 days. With that, he departed. I rose and went to examine the items he'd left behind. After reading the letter, I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. So, Shuabe. I'd long known that tiny place harbored ambitions. But I never imagined its ambition was to swallow the entire realm. Kang summoned the commander of the Imperial Guards, Lu Ming, to see me. 3 days later, this flower-viewing banquet would surely be a grand spectacle. Though called a flower-viewing banquet, Empress Dowager Guo had actually gathered the families of officials of the 4th rank and above. She intended to use this as leverage to secure her son's ascension to the throne. The moment I entered the palace, I felt the fearful gazes of these delicate young ladies and noble wives. Those who had entered the palace in high spirits moments ago, upon seeing the heavily guarded imperial garden, realized this was a trap. The moment my foot stepped into the garden, a shifty-eyed man in armor stood among the guards, staring at me. Princess Consort Guo, seated on the high platform, glanced at him nervously before glaring hatefully at me again. The princess has arrived. Let the banquet commence, Consort Guo instructed those behind her. The imperial wives and ladies timidly took their seats, guided by their maids. The flowers in the imperial garden are in splendid bloom today. I specially invited you all here for this banquet. Please, no formalities, let us begin. Thank you, consort. Seated upon the high platform, Empress Dowager Guo wore an expression of pure satisfaction. Beside her sat another woman. Upon closer look, it was indeed Yao Ji. Such a banquet would surely feature poetry. Yao Ji opened her mouth and delivered a timeless verse, drawing gasps of admiration from the crowd. After a cup of wine, I couldn't help but laugh. What is the Empress Dowager up to? Before Grand Consort Guo could respond, Yao Ji sneered. Naturally, she covets the military authority held by the princess. The drugged wine took effect, my eyelids growing heavy until they finally closed. When I opened them again, I found myself locked in a dungeon. Damp, cold, and filthy. A pair of ornate embroidered shoes entered my vision. Looking up, I saw their owner, Yao Ji. Ling on you, you too shall taste the life of a prisoner, she sneered. Her mockery didn't faze me. My gaze lingered on her flat, unblemished belly. Noticing my stare, she crouched down and whispered in my ear, that foolish man still thinks I adore him. How does it feel to play second fiddle? Princess Anhui of Shuabe sure knows how to scheme, even including herself in the plan. She shot me a cold glance, then shoved me hard backward. My head slammed against the wall, leaving me lightheaded. She towered over me, her face impassive. With some adornments removed, her nose bore the distinctive features of the northern Shuabe region. High and straight. Her pale blue eyes were captivating and full of passion. Such a beauty, yet her mind was clouded, fixated on her delusions of being the protagonist. Oh, and that Shinzoni you sent out? He's already poisoned and dead. You, the eldest princess, are now utterly alone. Hearing Shinzoni's name, my pupils contracted slightly, and I sprang to my feet. The iron chains around my wrists clanked loudly. Seeing my disarray, Yao Ji smiled with satisfaction before departing. But after she left, she didn't see the slow curve of my lips. Grand Consort Guo had also visited, flaunting her son and boasting that with the support of certain officials, he would ascend the throne. The coronation ceremony was set for the day after tomorrow. Moonlight streamed through the tiny window above, illuminating the prison guards. I sat to the side, cupping the falling moonlight in my hands. What are you staring at? Come in already. Shinzoni stepped out of the darkness, clad in armor and gripping his sword. He raised an eyebrow teasingly. Does the princess still have such a taste for moon-gazing? Any unusual movements in Shuabe? TSK. You're not one for refined pastimes. Shinzoni handed over the scrolls. Even if there were, they wouldn't dare. I've stationed all the troops from the 3 cities in Shuabe, 1,000,000 soldiers strong. He paused and chuckled. As for Yao Ji's scheme to capture the king, she forgot whose territory this is. Her plan for an inside-outside operation was clever, but it only served to expose a bunch of corrupt officials. The day after tomorrow, when we seize Empress Dowager Guo and those corrupt officials, will be the day Beishua City falls. How could Shuabe manage without you? I demand absolute certainty. Otherwise. Shinzoni had appeared before me, bending down to touch his forehead to mine. He murmured softly, then I shall present my head to you. He pressed a kiss to my brow. I shall win this battle on you, and you must emerge unscathed. I studied his features, noticing the faint scar above his left eyebrow. I kissed it gently. You must stay safe too. On the day of my coronation, the palace bustled with activity long before dawn. I saw Ashu followed by maidservants, carrying ornate robes. Your Highness, please change. The ceremony has begun in the front hall. I sat down, letting her dress me. Only when the guards came to announce it did I slowly step out. Everywhere I looked, there was not a trace of color. Upon reaching the Qinguang Hall, officials knelt everywhere. Beside them stood Shinzoni in black armor, while Consort Gui held my stepbrother. As for Princess Anhui, Yaoxi, she stared at me in disbelief, held down by guards and unable to rise. How much wealth have you all embezzled? The officials below cowered in fear, not a single one daring to speak. Qin Xing knelt among them, trembling violently. I clearly saw hatred flash in his eyes. Qin Shu, whom he had sent to Jiangnan, was no nephew. He was the illegitimate child born of Qin Xing and his sister-in-law, a union defying all moral bounds. Alas, on the very day the Minister of Revenue reported his arrival, Qin Shu grew impatient, preparing to embezzle disaster relief funds and return to the Qin household, only to be beheaded by the Inspector General. Ling on you. By refusing to let your father's sole heir ascend the throne, what are your true intentions? You likely covet the imperial throne yourself. Grand Consort Gui pointed at me, her voice boiling with fury. Her agitation grew as she rose to her feet. Honorable ministers! You disregard ancestral law to crown a mere woman as emperor? My poor son! Ling on you, do you not fear being drowned in the scorn of all under heaven? Not a single soul in the grand hall dared to agree with her. Instead, everyone bowed their heads even lower. Crown Prince? I spat out the words, sneering at her. Gui Shimon, you dare call the child born from your illicit affair a prince? Panic flashed in her eyes as I spoke. She snarled, Ling on you, you spew nothing but lies. To prevent your brother from ascending the throne, you'd even. This servant confesses everything. Shinzoni pointed his sword, and the little eunuch beside Empress Dowager Gui's knees buckled as he knelt. I recognized him instantly, that shifty-eyed man from the garden that day. Trembling, he confessed everything. He and Gui Shimon had been childhood sweethearts, but when the emperor toured the south, Gui Shimon had climbed into his bed. Unwilling to abandon her childhood love, she schemed to keep this man by her side. They had an affair, and the child was theirs. Drag Consort Gui out and execute her by beating before the entire palace. Behead this man and the child, then cast their bodies out of the palace. Gui Shimon's face twisted in disbelief. She raved, Ling on you, may you rot in hell. You. Her words were cut short as guards stuffed a gag into her mouth and dragged her away. Princess Anhui. I crouched down, gazing at her. She seemed unaware that Shuabe had already abandoned her. Ling on you, I advise you to release me. Otherwise, my father and brothers will surely. Oh. Your father and brothers? Where is the general of the Middle Army? Your servant is here. A man outside the chamber stepped forward and knelt. Bring the items. A man carried 3 boxes forward and placed them before Yaoxi. Yaoxi stared at me in utter shock, muttering impossible. I took the long sword from his hand and lifted the lid. Inside lay the very heads she had spoken of, those of her father and brothers. These 3 had sucked the lifeblood from Shuabe's people, leaving the populace suffering terribly. 10 days prior, I had already dispatched men to infiltrate Shuabe and secure their heads. Though Shuabe harbored grand ambitions, its generals and officials had long since fallen into a pit of money and pleasure. They possessed no strength left for battle. Yaoxi, seeing their state, let out a shriek and stood up, pointing at me. Before she could speak, a man's voice rang out, Ling on you, how could you do this to Yaoxi? It was Qin Qi. He rushed over, cradling Yaoxi in his arms, his eyes burning with fury as he glared at me. Has the Qin family ever owed you money? You've already framed her child, what more do you want? Her life? The annihilation of my entire family? Nonsense. Qin Xing, lying on the ground, cried out in terror. When Shinzoni looked his way, he fell completely silent. Faced with life and death, he had chosen himself over his son. And Qin Shi remained as foolish as ever. Do you even know who she is? I laughed. She's merely the princess of Shuabe. Why force an innocent woman to her death? His words were truly worthy of applause. This was nothing short of publicly admitting the Chen family's alliance with Beishua. I no longer looked at him. Waving my hand, I ordered, "Seize them both." Qin Shi tried to resist, but Shinzoni delivered a direct kick to his knee. The pain forced him to his knees. Only when he saw the long sword pressed against his throat did he finally realize something was terribly wrong. He stared at me with terror etched across his face. Minister Xian and his party, enter. My loyal followers and the faction of incorruptible officials from the imperial court arrived belatedly. The officials previously summoned by Empress Dowager Guo were all corrupt, big and small. The group of noble ladies and young misses she had held hostage had long been rescued by Shinzoni's men. Her perceived bargaining chips were now gone. Officials connected to the Qin family were nearly all gathered here. From the day Shinzoni returned, his scheme in Shuabe had already begun. The recapture of Shuabe occurred precisely on the day Shinzoni came to me, wounded. At that time, Yaoshi believed he had fallen victim to the Shuabe king's ambush and died from poison. All was settled. The minister knelt and proclaimed, the late emperor had no heir. We beseech the princess to ascend the throne. Meanwhile, a group of corrupt officials, previously fretting over their survival, now saw their chance presented to them. They were naturally quicker than anyone else. Please ascend the throne, Your Highness. I looked at Shinzoni, who stood quietly to the side. Our eyes met. He gave a silent smile, then knelt on one knee, voicelessly declaring, I submit. Then he shouted loudly, Please ascend the throne, Your Highness. In the 3rd year of Qing Yuan, I ascended the throne. My imperial title was Emperor Jiehui. I glanced at the memorials on the desk, then at the man standing below. Have you made your decision? This servant has. My faith lies in reclaiming Shuabe and Mabe. With your majesty and the ministers in the capital, this servant wishes to oversee the northern frontier for 2 more years. Shuabe has just been reclaimed, it cannot be without a great general to defend it. This servant volunteers to go. Seeing his resolute expression, all the words I'd prepared to dissuade him sank back into my throat. He, Shinzoni, was an eagle confined within the court. The imperial seal was stamped. He went to reclaim the frontier as he wished. My ideal lay in governing the realm. The frontier, I'd see it in my next life. Extra Chapter 1 Mling Hanji, Crown Prince of Dashuan. My mother said my name signifies virtue as profound as an infant's innocence. She hoped I would embody both virtue and responsibility. But father declared such notions utterly useless, enraging mother into calling him an illiterate fool. My parents were peculiar. I first met father at age 4, accompanying my uncle to the frontier. They told me the great general riding that horse, Shinzoni, was my father. When I timidly looked at him, his eyes reddened and he apologized to my mother. Then the very next day, he conquered the northern frontier and presented it to her. My mother is the Empress of Great Xian. She is very busy. Under her rule, the people all sing her praises. There is also a group of ministers in court who constantly flatter her. Whatever she says, they do. Uncle the minister once told me these were officials spared by corrupt officials of that era, men with merit who had never oppressed the people. From that time onward, they became mother's sycophants. It was also they who sent me to the frontier, where father taught me military strategy year after year. I too grew to love the frontier. The palace felt like a boxed-in world, watching mother navigate the ministers, nothing compared to the freedom of the frontier. This year, bearing a letter from mother, I came to see father again. My parents have never met since my birth, only I deliver their letters each year. This year, I turned 13. From afar, I saw father standing outside long before dawn. When he spotted me approaching, a smile touched his face. You're here. Come, father will show you something fun. Every year at the frontier, father would take me hunting or watch the soldiers drill. I enjoyed these things too. But when I arrived at the battlefield, I was bewildered. Father hadn't told me we were coming to fight. As he handed me the long sword, he chuckled, you've never seen anything, have you? Acting like you've never seen the world before, just because you're going to battle. In that moment, I felt like I'd fallen into a trap. After following father into battle, I gradually found my footing. So this was the true horror of the battlefield. The battle ended with our victory. On the way back, still lost in thought, my father leaned in and asked, "Got it now?" I nodded quickly. "Yes, father." I thought, isn't it just about building mental fortitude? My father nodded too, then left with a satisfied look. Neither of us realized we'd both misunderstood each other. Early the next morning, I learned my father, who hadn't returned to the capital in 13 years, he had ridden back to the capital through the night. He left me a letter, it's just being that he could bear it no longer. He missed my mother deeply. Seeing that I had been on the battlefield and could fight, he entrusted the deputy commander and the entire contingent to me before returning to the capital. I tremblingly tucked away the letter. So that was what he meant last night, had I understood? Father, you really outdid yourself. Furious, I penned a 10,000-word letter drenched in blood and tears to my mother, hoping she'd vent my anger for me. But General Chen, now home, cared little for such matters. First, he must return to the capital to see his wife, 13 years apart. His longing had already seeped into his very bones. With the frontier secured, he couldn't wait a moment longer. And